My name is Noah. I'm 46. 10 years ago, I moved to a suburb outside Portland and married a woman named Linda. She had 2 children from a previous marriage, Caleb and Emma. People talk about blended families like there's some slow, warm process like sugar dissolving in tea. They don't talk about the bitterness that sits at the bottom, waiting for you. When I married Linda, I thought I was walking into a second chance. I didn't want children of my own. Not then. I figured I'd missed that boat and made peace with it. But Linda came with a ready-made family. 2 kids, a 3-bedroom house, and a string of routines already in place. What I didn't understand back then, what I refused to see, was that I wasn't joining a family. I was being tolerated inside of one. Still, I tried. God, I tried. The first few months were easy. Newness has that effect. I paid for new paint, upgraded the kitchen, fixed the furnace that had been blowing cold. I came in like a storm of helpfulness. I told myself I was being a good man. I told myself that mattered. Caleb was 9. Emma 7. They were polite enough at first. Thank you, please. The kinds of phrases kids say when they're being watched. I drove them to school, packed their lunches. I paid for their field trips when Linda's paycheck came up short. I didn't mind. Felt like purpose. Felt like becoming something. Back then, I thought that effort would plant roots. I thought they'd see it, all the little things. But I was always just slightly outside the picture. They never said it. Not then. But it showed. In the photo frames, all full of Trevor. In the bedtime stories, ones he used to read. In the birthdays where I stood just outside the circle holding the camera. Their father, Trevor, lived a few states over. Colorado, I think. Back then, he came maybe 4 times a year. He'd blow into town like a gust of warm air. Laughing, loud, full of movie tickets and fast food. He never asked about their grades. Never stayed for the hard parts. But he brought gifts. He brought stories. He brought fun. And that was enough. He didn't pay child support. I know because I asked gently once. Linda waved the question away like it was smoke. He's not reliable, she said. It's better not to depend on him. So we depended on me. And that somehow was fine. I started picking up more hours. I took contract jobs on the weekends. When Caleb needed braces, I opened a new line of credit. When Emma's school planned a trip to D.C., I signed the check while Linda assured me we'd figure it out later. Later never came. But the bills always did. The mortgage wasn't in my name. The house had belonged to Linda and Trevor when they were married. She'd kept it in the divorce. I offered to refinance once, thinking it would bring things closer. She smiled and said, "Let's not complicate things. The paperwork's already settled." And because I wanted peace more than power, I let it go. That was mistake number 1. But there were so many others after it, they blur together now. Trevor's visits were chaotic but brief. When he came to town, the energy in the house shifted. Emma got louder. Caleb stood taller. They buzzed with it, like he brought oxygen and I was just air. They'd come home with bags of candy, shirts from NBA games, toy drones I knew they'd forget about in a week. They posted selfies with him, tagged him, called him the best dad ever. I'd scroll past them in silence, sitting in the garage, holding a wrench, fixing Caleb's bike for the 3rd time that month. Trevor never called when the kids were sick. He didn't know Emma's peanut allergy had worsened. He didn't know Caleb had started lying about homework. He never saw the rage in Caleb's eyes when he felt ignored, or the way Emma shook when she didn't feel safe. I saw it. I handled it, quietly, without ceremony. But I never got credit for those things, because real fatherhood isn't loud. It's invisible, and invisible things are easy to ignore. Linda didn't mean to undermine me, not directly, but she let them treat Trevor like a visiting king. She didn't insist on boundaries. She didn't speak up when they made comparisons. Trevor lets us stay up late. Trevor said he'd take us to Disneyland next summer. Trevor says you work too much. I'd raise my eyes across the dinner table, searching for Linda's face, for some signal that she'd correct them. But she'd just sip her wine and change the subject. As if silence made it disappear. Didn't. It just made it fester. I remember one Sunday afternoon. I had spent 3 hours assembling a bunk bed for Emma, her request. She wanted to sleep on the top. When I finished, drenched in sweat, with dust in my lungs, she climbed the ladder, looked around and said, "Cool." But Trevor's was bigger. That was the first time I felt it. The fracture. Small. Clean. Just beneath the ribs. I said nothing. Just smiled. Just nodded. Just swallowed it. That became a habit. Swallowing things. Caleb turned 12. Started ignoring curfews. Emma stopped hugging me goodnight. Linda started calling Trevor more, just to coordinate. His name came up in the house more than mine. But still, I paid. I showed up. I filled the fridge. I took Caleb to the ER after he broke his wrist on a skateboard. I waited with Emma at the dentist. I built shelves in the garage for their science projects. I thought that was the test. That if I just held out long enough, if I kept loving them the right way, the quiet way, the real way, they'd see it. But love doesn't fix loyalty, especially when you were never chosen to begin with. That's the part one ignored for too long. I was never chosen. Linda chose me for herself. The kids inherited me like a second mortgage. And Trevor? He reaped all the rewards of fatherhood without paying any cost. They called him Dad with pride. They called me Noah when they were mad. Chipped away year after year. 1,000 little cuts. 1,000 small exclusions. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I stopped feeling like a man in his home. I started feeling like a guest overstaying his welcome. But I still paid the bills. Because somewhere in my gut, I thought that made me belong. Didn't. It just made me useful. And usefulness has an expiration date. The year Trevor moved back was the year I stopped pretending. It didn't happen all at once. That's the lie people like to tell themselves. That betrayal is an event. But it's not. It's erosion. You don't hear the rot while it's happening. It's quiet. Slow. But one day you open a door, and the floor gives out beneath you. Trevor didn't even ask permission. He just announced it during one of his pop-in visits. Standing in the driveway, engine still running. "Thinking of moving back here," he said, like he was asking about the weather. "Found some work. Might get a place nearby." Emma squealed. Caleb said, "That'd be awesome." Linda didn't look at me. And just like that, the boundaries I had built, the delicate scaffolding of routine, discipline, presence, started to collapse. Because when Trevor moved back, he didn't come to co-parent. He came to reclaim. At first, I told myself it was fine. He'd come around, realize how hard it was. That weekends weren't all sunshine and amusement parks when you had real responsibilities. That kids were more than smiles and Instagram posts. I thought he'd fold within a month. But he didn't. Trevor was a master of illusion. He brought candy and charm, called Emma Princess, called Caleb Champ. He took them to the zoo, to the coast, to concerts I couldn't afford. When Emma needed new shoes, he bought her 3 pairs. When Caleb mentioned soccer, he showed up the next week with tickets to a Timbers game. Not the cheap seats midfield. He didn't ask about rules. Didn't check in with Linda. He just showed up, took them, brought them back late, full of sugar and stories. The kids glowed when they talked about him. Trevor said he might take us to Hawaii next summer. Trevor said he might let us get a dog. Trevor says you're kind of strict. That last one landed like a punch. I looked at Linda across the table. She didn't meet my eyes. Just said, "He's probably joking." But jokes have weight when they come from a parent. And Trevor was playing his role to perfection. Charming and irresponsible. Untouchable. A myth made flesh. He undermined everything I'd built. Every curfew, every consequence, every bit of structure. If I grounded Caleb, Trevor would sneak him out for burgers. If I told Emma no, Trevor would say yes. He was gravity in reverse, always lifting the rules just high enough to float above them. And Linda? She said nothing. That was worse than Trevor. Because when the kids pushed back, when they started testing limits, when they rolled their eyes at me or mocked my tone, she didn't defend me. She softened. She bent. She shrugged. "They're just adjusting," she said. "It's a phase," she said. "Don't take it personally," she said. But it was personal. It was personal the first time Caleb skipped dinner to stay at Trevor's apartment. without telling me. It was personal when Emma refused to hug me goodbye, then posted a picture captioned, "Best dad ever," next to Trevor's face. It was personal when I stood outside in the rain, replacing the mailbox after it was knocked over, and Trevor drove by with my stepkids in the back, all of them waving like I was the help. I started to disappear in my own house. My voice shrank. My presence faded. They still called me Dad, sometimes out of habit, maybe, but it felt different. There was an edge to it now, like it was something I had to re-earn every time Trevor made an appearance. One night, Emma came home late. I was waiting in the kitchen. "You're supposed to be in bed," I said. She rolled her eyes. "I'm not 5. You're 12. And it's a school night." She stared at me. "Trevor doesn't care if I stay up. He says I'm mature." I looked to Linda for backup. She was standing at the sink, drying a glass. She didn't say a word. "Go to bed," I said quietly. Emma stormed off. Linda kept drying. "Do you think I'm being unfair?" I asked. She didn't look at me, just said, "It's hard for them. Try to be patient." That was the moment I knew. I wasn't parenting anymore. I was managing, hurting, providing, but parenting, that was reserved for Trevor now, the part-time ghost with a golden tongue and no bills in his name. The next few months were worse. Trevor started showing up unannounced. He'd text Linda, not me, and say, "Hey, taking the kids for the day." Sometimes they were already gone before I even knew he'd been there. He had keys. He had access. I had obligations. I watched him lean against the doorframe, sunglasses on, smiling like he owned the place. Emma clinging to his side, Caleb slapping his hand. And all I could think was, I paid for this door. I paid for this house. I paid for their lives. But he owned their attention, their admiration, their laughter. I began to feel something dark. Not anger, not exactly. More like absence. An ache that came in quiet moments. Watching TV alone while Linda sat upstairs, laughing with Emma. Lying in bed with my eyes open while Caleb texted Trevor late into the night. I was a man floating in a life I built, and no one noticed I was sinking. Linda started mentioning Trevor more casually. "Trevor thinks Caleb should try private school. Trevor might help with Emma's braces." It was always might. He never actually did. But the mention was enough to remind me. I was no longer the only voice in the room. And yet, I was still the only one who paid. One night, I tried to talk to Caleb. It had been weeks since we'd had a full conversation. "Can we go for a drive?" I asked. "Just the two of us." He shrugged. "I'm busy." "Doing what?" "Nothing. I miss talking to you." He looked up from his phone. "You're not my real dad. We don't have to talk." He said it like he was stating the weather. I stood there for a moment, breath gone, like someone had knocked the air from my lungs. Linda heard it. She was in the hallway. She didn't correct him. I left the room. I sat in the garage for 2 hours, engine off, in the dark. And I understood something. The illusion was breaking. I had spent years convincing myself I was part of something. But I was just a long-term substitute teacher in a classroom where the students had already made up their minds. The title of Dad was performative, temporary, a sticker that could be peeled off when the right man walked through the door. And now that he had, I was fading but still paying, always paying. Because when Trevor said he'd help with braces, I wrote the check. When he said he'd get Caleb new cleats, I bought them anyway, because Caleb needed them now. When Emma got sick and Trevor was unreachable, I stayed up all night with a damp towel and a thermometer, and Linda said, "Thank you," like I was doing a favor, not fulfilling a role. I looked around one day and realized, nothing in that house bore my name. Not the title, not the walls, not the children. I had built a home out of my effort and become a guest in it. But still I stayed. Still I paid. Still I tried. Because I believed there was honor in sacrifice. Even if no one saw it. Even if they resented me for it. Even if they called another man Dad while I mowed the lawn. But something had started to shift. Not in them, in me. I began counting receipts. I began reading the fine print. I began tracking how often Linda said we and how often she said Trevor. and I began asking myself a question I had never dared to ask before. What if they're right? What if I don't belong? What if I never did? Silence isn't empty. That's what I learned too late. Silence is a decision. And once you recognize it, you can't unsee it. Linda's silence had shape. Weight. Filled rooms. It followed me down hallways. It sat at the table with us during dinner and stared straight ahead while the kids dismantled me piece by piece. When Caleb spoke over me, she stayed quiet. When Emma rolled her eyes at my rules, she stayed quiet. When Trevor mocked me openly, joked about Noah's bedtime policies, or called me Mr. Schedule, she laughed softly and said nothing. That was the moment I stopped being a husband and became infrastructure. I fixed what broke, paid what was due. I absorbed what hurt, but I was no longer a voice anyone listened to. The shift was subtle, but relentless. Decisions started happening without me. School meetings I wasn't told about. Weekend plans made after I'd already worked overtime to afford them. Conversations that stopped the second I entered the room. I started feeling like a stranger renting space in my own life. One night, I came home late from work and found the dining table covered in papers. Real estate listings. Printed emails. Linda looked up at me, startled. Like she hadn't expected me to exist. "We're just exploring options," she said. "For what?" I asked. She hesitated. "Downsizing. Maybe selling." I laughed once, short and sharp. "Selling what?" "The house. The house. The one I'd paid for in everything but ink. The one I'd repaired, insulated, upgraded. The one I'd protected like a body protects a vital organ." "When were you going to tell me?" I asked. She shrugged. "It's complicated." That word again. Always that word. A week later, Caleb said it out loud. No hesitation. No guilt. "You'll need to be gone by the end of the month," he said, standing in the kitchen like he was issuing instructions to a contractor. "The house is sold." I stared at him. "Excuse me?" "It's legal," he said. Mom checked. Emma was behind him. Her face was red. Angry. She grabbed my old jacket from the hook, the one I wore every winter, and threw it at my chest. "You're a burden," she screamed. "You're not even our dad." Then she slammed the door to her room. Linda didn't stop her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. Something in me had gone very still. I walked outside. The air felt thin. Unreal. I reached into the inside pocket of the jacket Emma had thrown at me. My fingers brushed paper. Folded. Old. I sat on the steps and unfolded it. A document. Signed years earlier. During one of those helping the family moments. A legal waiver. My name at the bottom. My handwriting unmistakable. I had waived ownership. Waived guarantees. Waived claims. All voluntarily. All permanent. I remembered the day I signed it. Linda smiling. Saying it was just in case. Saying, "This doesn't change anything." Changed everything. I laughed then. Quietly. The sound scared me. I hadn't been betrayed suddenly. I'd been dismantled carefully. I packed that night. One suitcase. No scene. Linda stood in the doorway, arms crossed. She said nothing. Not "I'm sorry." Not "thank you." Not even goodbye. I left the keys on the counter. I didn't look back. Later, I learned the truth. The sale money went to debts, to moving costs, to Trevor. And then, predictably, he vanished again. The money followed him. I filed for divorce. Asked for nothing. I moved to another city. Started over. Smaller place. Quiet. The calls came eventually. The emails. The letters. I never responded. Because by then, I understood something with painful clarity. Love without respect is a trap. And a family that can erase you using your own signature was never yours. So tell me, was I wrong to leave without a fight? Or would you have stayed knowing exactly what you were worth to them? You'd think leaving would be the hardest part. But it wasn't. The hardest part was realizing that no one tried to stop me. That after 10 years of paying the bills, covering the gaps, lifting the weight of someone else's life onto my shoulders, I could disappear without anyone even bothering to ask where I was going. No calls that night. No footsteps down the stairs. Not even a half-hearted wait. I drove 3 hours north. My phone on silent. My mind even quieter. I'd rented a small apartment in a town no one in that family had ever heard of. No history here. No roots. Just space. A box with a roof. Enough to exist in. The walls were thin. The plumbing moaned. The carpet was stained with someone else's history. But it was mine. And no one else's name sat on the lease. The first morning I woke up there, I didn't know what to do with the quiet. There was no lunch to pack. No thermostat to adjust. No leftover expectations hanging in the air. Just silence. Honest, cold silence. The kind I could trust. I made coffee. Sat at the window. Watched people pass by on the sidewalk, moving in and out of lives I'd never touch. And for the first time in years I realized, no one needed me. Not in a bitter way. In a clean way. Because needing someone without respecting them isn't love. It's dependency. It's rot dressed up as gratitude. Weeks passed. I paid my bills on time. Alone. I ate at the same diner 3 nights a week. The waitress learned my name. She didn't ask about my family. She didn't know I'd lost one. But the word lost is generous. You can't lose something that was never yours. I kept expecting the world to come crashing down. Like in the movies. A desperate voicemail. A knock at the door. Someone on the verge of tears saying they were wrong. They didn't realize what they had. They need me back. But life isn't a movie. You don't get scenes. You get silences. You get time and distance. You get indifference. Linda sent 2 emails. Short. Cold. Administrative. She asked if I wanted any of the furniture. I told her no. She asked if I wanted the wedding album. I didn't reply. She stopped writing after that. But one day, weeks later, I received a letter. Not from Linda. From Caleb. I didn't open it right away. I stared at the envelope for days. It was handwritten. My name in the center. Just Noah. Not Dad. Not even stepdad. I opened it on a Sunday after it rained. The streets smelled like wet cement. The letter was short. He said he didn't understand everything. He said he was angry at Trevor for leaving again. That they had to sell the second car. That Linda cried more now. That Emma missed me but didn't know how to say it. He ended the letter with one line. I guess we didn't realize who was holding it all up. I didn't write back. Because guilt isn't growth. And realizing you burned the bridge doesn't rebuild it. I kept the letter, though. Folded it clean, placed it in a drawer I rarely opened. Not because I forgave him. Not because I planned to reply. But because I needed to remember. Not all losses are tragedies. Some are surgeries. Necessary. Bloody. Painful. But cleansing. I started therapy. I didn't tell the therapist the whole story at first. I spoke in half confessions. The way men do when they've swallowed too much pride. But eventually, I told her everything. The silence. The roles. The way Linda looked through me. The way Caleb's voice changed when Trevor entered the room. The way Emma threw that jacket like it was trash. And the document. The one I signed. The one that gave them the power to erase me. She asked if I regretted it. I said no. Because that paper didn't betray me. It revealed them. It showed me that trust without boundaries isn't noble. It's dangerous. I stopped checking their social media. I stopped hoping Linda would apologize. I stopped expecting a knock at the door. And I started living. Not a grand life. Not an exciting one. But a life built on truth. I adopted a dog from the shelter. He didn't care about my past. He just wanted food and walks and time. I could give him those. And he gave me something I hadn't felt in years. Presence. One night, I sat on the couch, him curled up at my feet. A game was on TV. I wasn't watching. I was thinking about all the ways we define family. Blood, paper, time, proximity. But none of those held. None of those protected me. Respect was the missing piece. And without it, every other bond was counterfeit. I had lived in a counterfeit family. A well-decorated lie. I had been the scaffolding they hung their lives on. And when they were ready to redecorate, they tore me down. The lesson didn't come with rage. Came with stillness. I had given everything and asked for so little. All I wanted was to matter. But in the end, I mattered only as long as I was useful. The minute I asked for dignity, the house was sold. The minute I said no, I was out. That's not a family. That's a transaction. And I am not a bank. So now, when people talk about blended families, I smile politely. I say it can work if everyone wants it to. But inside, I know the truth. Sometimes you don't join a family. You get hired. And when the job is done, they thank you with silence. So I ask you, the ones still listening, was I wrong to disappear without warning? To leave the house I paid for, the children I raised, the woman I loved, all without a single demand? Or was that the only way to finally be heard? What would you have done? Would you have stayed? Would you have begged to be respected? Or would you have packed your jacket, walked out the door, and started over? Tell me not what's polite. Tell me the truth.